is Carrie Novak, and I'm GoodellNet's Training and Development Leader. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. The topic of project management is becoming more and more popular and is an absolute must in the modern workplace. Nevertheless, only 58% of organizations fully understand the value of project management, and only 22% of organizations use project management software. So having a better understanding of project management and why it's a necessity is the reason we included this topic in our 2019 webinar series here at GoodellNet. Us through today's webinar is our very own project manager, James Gentry. James has been with GoodellNet for about 9 months and brings with him years of project management experience, as well as his project management professional certification, or PMP. Passionate about project management and the benefits it brings to an organization. If you have a question during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat function. There might be opportunities to ask questions throughout, and questions can also be addressed at the end. This webinar will be recorded, and we will send out the recording after the call. And included with that recording will be a brief survey, and we would be very appreciative if you take a moment and fill it out. So without further ado, here's James.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today, as Carrie said. Just a little background myself before I jump right into it. I've been project managing in a couple different industries since about 2015 or 14 or so. And that includes background in Los Angeles. I worked in as a project manager out there. They called it a production manager in kind of film, television, and commercials. And then I came back here to St. Louis, where I'm originally from, and I project managed for the last 3 or 4 years at a software development company. And then, as Carrie said, about 9 months ago, I made one of the best decisions of my life and joined GoodellNet. And so now I am primary project manager over here, and could not be more excited to be with you today. So jump right into it. Just in case you're wondering what I look like, that's me on the left, and obviously Carrie over there on the right. I'm sure most of you know her already. And here's just kind of an overview of what we'll be talking about today. I'm not sure what everyone's understanding is of project management, so I thought I would start at a fairly high level and just kind of go over what projects are, what project management is, and different methodologies that do exist in project management. And that'll segue into kind of I'll do a short demo on a couple different tools that are really popular in the industry, a couple that I've used before, and ones that might make sense for your organization. And then lastly, we can do kind of a Q&A session if anyone has any questions, and we'll talk about what you should consider, what you should factor in when choosing the right tool for your organization. Before I get started, are there any other questions or anything right off the bat that I can cover? All right, I'll jump right into it. So I think before we talk about project management, it's important to understand what a project is. And as you can see up here on the slide, a project is defined as just a temporary undertaking with a specific beginning and end time and defined resources and scope. It's also a unique endeavor, so something that exists as a one-off. It's not something that's going to be continuous into the future. As it says, it has an established set of operations and functions designed to achieve a singular objective. And I like to think of it as a series of tasks that need to be completed in order to reach a very specific goal or outcome. As you can see below, there's a little chart here that shows how projects can be differentiated. And so you can see that in organizations, we like to display this as there's either operations or projects. Here at GoodellNet, all of our engineers and service desk people, they all technically fall under operations. Then a separate sect of that is projects. Some of these engineers do work on projects, but we like to keep it very separate. And how we define a project here at GoodellNet is something that really takes more than 10 hours to complete. That's a very basic line in the sand we draw, but also something that has phases that requires a little bit more coordination and effort than just an engineer coming on site and performing their work. As you can see here, there are some similarities between operations and projects. They're both performed by people, as I mentioned, engineers, or if it's in your workplace, it might be construction workers, whoever that might be, developers. They're all both are limited by available resources, so that could include time, that could include money, that could include some other constraints placed upon the project or the task by the client. And both are planned, executed, and controlled. So operations, so if someone, for example, is coming out to fix your computer, they may only take a couple hours. There's very little planning involved, except for coordinating when that person might be available to meet with. Whereas a project, we might be replacing a firewall, a couple of switches, and some other network equipment that takes a little bit more coordination just to make sure people understand the repercussions of doing that and any outages that might be impacted. And as I kind of touched upon before, there are some differences. Operations are continuous and repetitive, they're ongoing, and projects are unique. So a project has a set start and a set end date. Those are kind of the important things to remember. Project management is a fairly new profession comparatively. It first started coming about in the mid 20th century, so you can find some early teachings about it, 1930s, 1940s, but really began to develop into a practice by the 1950s. And what it is kind of just the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to achieve project objectives and requirements. I like to think of it as herding cats. Other people like to think of it as juggling, keeping all your balls in the air without dropping any. If you're an effective project manager, the cat herding scenario is not as relevant, but still applicable. And let's see. So underneath project management, we break it into 5 different process groups, and you'll see all of the methodologies kind of have a different way of breaking this down into categories, but the one I follow and the one that we follow here at GoodellNet and many industry follows the PMI or PMBOK kind of methodology. And so those 5 process groups are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closeout. And so the core 3 things that every methodology shares is there's a planning phase, an executing phase, and either a quality control or monitoring and controlling phase. And most of our projects here at least include the last 4 stages, but I'm really working hard to make sure that we include all 5. So within project management, there are 10 different knowledge areas that this breaks down to. I'm going to lightly touch upon each of them. I don't want to put you asleep, so I won't go into each of them too deeply. But I'll give you an example of each. So it starts with project integration management. And integration is just kind of being the glue, bringing everything together. You can think of that as kind of developing the fundamental plans of a project charter, kind of the fundamental plans of developing the plan in the first place, developing a roadmap along the way. There's also, let me jump back here, there's also project scope management. And the scope is everything that is contained within a project. So that's everything, if GoodellNet was performing some work for your company, that's everything that's encountered under that project or within the scope of that project. If it's something outside of the scope of the project, myself or an engineer will likely call that out to you and just say, hey, just so you're aware, this will either have to be billable or we'll have to perform some sort of change management to include that in the scope. And the purpose of that is just making sure that projects don't get out of hand or don't go out of hand. That's with regard to time, with regard to budget, with regard to many other factors as well. Aside from that, there's scheduling management, and that's just a matter of scheduling the necessary resources, making sure those meet the needs of the stakeholders, and that's both internal and external. And so that could include the engineers, the client, whoever it is. There's also cost and budget management. That's pretty self-explanatory, just making sure that things stay within budget. On time and under budget is kind of a motto that we referred to in project management, so that's a huge one. Resource management, that's related to scheduling, but that's more the actual internal resources that, for example, GoodellNet would use as far as the engineers, making sure they're available and meeting their assigned tasks and commitments. Quality management, that relates more to making sure that all across the process, but especially after the work's completed, that everything's up to the standards of the client. And so we're, not only finishing under budget and on time, but also living up to the standards that the client expects. Communication management, that's really just kind of developing a communication plan with the client, whether that's a weekly call, a weekly update, bi-weekly updates, whatever that is. That's usually hashed out pretty early on, and we'll talk about that a little more on the next slide. Risk management, of course, in any project, there are risks involved, and so, for example, if we were replacing a server at your company, there could be a potential downtime. So it would just be important that both the client and GoodellNet are aligned on when that downtime would be, and making sure that all of the end users at the client are aware of that as well. So, they're not trying to log onto a server one night and not have it being able to access it. So that's a very important one. Procurement, that relates more to GoodellNet, but say we were coming in to replace a firewall or a switch, just having a plan for procuring that equipment and make sure it arrives obviously on time so we can meet the schedule. And then stakeholders, that would be everyone involved in a project, anyone that has any interest in a project. So that could be the client, that could be the owner of a company we're performing work for, that could be me, that could be any other GoodellNet employee that would be working on said project. So I know that was a lot to go through in a brief period, so I'll stop here really quick if anyone has any questions. All right, well, we'll keep moving here because I think the reason most of you are here today to see the different demo of the different tools. So just kind of getting back to the 5-part process, I'm not going to go through each of these that thoroughly, but as you can see here, there's the initiation phase over on the far left, the planning phase, the next column, the execution phase, the monitoring and controlling phase, and finally the closeout phase. Now, all of these knowledge areas that I just talked about fall within these respective phases. Some of them, such as risk management, falls within multiple phases, but something such as like scheduling, that may only take place in the planning phase, or at least would be the hope. So you can see here, our process here, we'll start usually with an initiation and a kickoff call. We'll go into the planning phase and kind of develop a work breakdown and put everything together with regards to the schedule, resource alignment. Performing the work, the execution, that's usually a pretty short work or a short phase as long as the planning has been effective. Monitoring and controlling, that's, like I said, just making sure that everything was performed correctly, controlling the plan. And then the closeout, that's kind of doing any closeout calls, taking care of any billing stuff, just making sure that the client is happy with the end product. As I mentioned before, there are a bunch of different methodologies out there when it comes to project management. It seems like every few years there's a new one being created. I extensively have studied the PMI PMBOK one, and that's a lot of the methodologies actually are derivative of that, but it has a pretty straightforward process initiating to closing. Another one that I know we're trying to incorporate more and more into GoodellNet is the Lean Six Sigma one. It's similar, but kind of the principle behind that one is eliminating waste, and so making everything as efficient as possible. Here at GoodellNet, we also kind of operate under the waterfall methodology, and that's basically working through a project from start to finish. There's not a lot of back and forth. So understanding those requirements up front, analyzing everything, designing, coding, testing, and finally transitioning into operations. Another popular one you'll see is the Agile methodology, and that's very similar to the PMI PMBOK principle, where there's a planning, collaborating, and delivering. It's very simple. That one's more of an iterative phase, so there is some back and forth. So you'll see that a lot more in software development. And so, if moving forward, there are a lot of really good tools out there on the market. A lot of new web-based ones have popped up in the last 4 or 5 years that different companies are taking advantage of. So today we'll go through a couple of those, along with an old favorite, So with that said, we'll start with Smartsheet. And before I jump over there, just to kind of give an overview of Smartsheet, this is a complete web interface. They have a really nice mobile platform. They charge kind of a monthly fee per user. It's 14 to 25 per month. I know that our strategic services team utilizes this for some of their larger projects. As far as the different industries this could be used in my studying, it looks like it could be transitional across the board as far as if you're in construction, software development, or anything else. I'll show you here in a minute, but there are some great different real-time views, such as a calendar view, a card view, and a Gantt chart view, which are really handy. And as far as integrating with other applications, this one does integrate pretty well. They have an open API, so if you have a developer on staff, or if you have a development team that you work with, they should pretty easily be able to complete the integration. And with that said, there could be obviously some development hours involved. And I'm not positive on this, but I believe Smartsheet also has a team that you could work with for this integration as well. Let me jump over here to Smartsheet. Just give me a second. All right, so within Smartsheet, there's lots of different project types you can create. You'll see I just created a simple Agile project with a Gantt chart view. This is one you'll see in many different industries, and I'll kind of go into different views here and just explain what you're looking at. So under an Agile project, you'll see they've broken everything out into different sprints. Those sprints fall within the different phases, and under that, you can assign story points. Every company or every industry will have their own kind of interpretation of story points, but how I kind of look at that is there's basically 2 story points for every hour, and that's just a different way of budgeting for them. Of course, you don't have to rely on story points. You can also turn that Smartsheet into a dollar amount, or insert a dollar amount, or use simple hours for your budgeting. You can obviously adjust the duration, adjust the scheduling here, and we'll look at that more shortly in one of the other views. You can set predecessors as well. So say these items in Sprint 2 couldn't take place until ones in Sprint 1 are completed, then you can mark that as a predecessor. Obviously, you can keep track of the statuses, and then just include any information about what sprint the task fall on and notes. So this is a simple grid view. Let me switch over here to a Gantt view. A little bit tough to see, I believe, for you guys with the screen size, so I'll try to blow this up a little bit. But basically what this is showing is over here on the left, you have all your tasks and all of your different phases. And on the right, Gantt view is basically showing when those start and when they finish and how they interact and overlap with one another. So at the very top, you see the project as a whole is starting back here in May and would finish towards mid-June. You can see the sprints are built out throughout that whole thing. And then underneath that, you can see when the different tasks and different phases take place. This is just a sample one. So obviously, a real project would be much more elaborate than this, but I hope it gives you an idea of what you're looking at. Lots of different features on here too for different filters. You can obviously color coordinate, as you can see. In addition to that view, there's also a card view. Another name for this is the Kanban view. Kanban does actually have its own methodology for project management, but something that more and more of the different methodologies are using or utilizing is this kind of card. And what this does, you'll see this in pretty much every platform, including another one I'm going to show you today, but it basically shows all of your tasks with the sprints, shows what phase they're in, move them around pretty easily. You can expand it a little bit to view details. You can make edits fairly easily as well. So this is just a nice overview of showing where all of your tasks and or all of your phases are. You can see here there's a few different options too, and so if you want to break that down even further and get even more granular with it, you can have kind of this card view for the different areas within your organization, or if you have multiple projects going on, it's another way to align it. Finally, there's a calendar view within Smartsheet as well. Similar to a Gantt chart in that it's showing, it's kind of duration based, and so showing start and end dates of everything. But this is just a nicer calendar view that you can export and have a better vision of when things are taking place. And again, from here, you can dig down into all of the different tasks and phases and make edits as you see fit. Smartsheet's nice because you can do some automation. And so sending alerts, setting up different alerts like Microsoft Teams or Slack or some of the other different communication channels is really easy to do. Set reminders. It's always very straightforward. The reports here are a little bit trickier. With my access level, I'm not able to build the reports because I don't personally use Smartsheet. So I'm kind of limited on what I can do. But from my understanding and from what I recall is that with the reports, you can basically build them up from scratch and have them look at multiple projects at once, or insert multiple variables from the same project to build your reports. Another tool that I would like to show you today, I'll jump to the screen first. And before I actually move on, with Smartsheet, you can see here there's a little view of what the online interface would look like. It's not very handy, it's just one picture, but different views from that. And then here's another one that I want to cover today, and that's Asana. You've probably heard of Asana before. It's a really popular tool, not only for project management, but just task management in general. Asana is nice because you can create custom views. Again, you do have that subscription option. The base price is a little bit cheaper than Smartsheet and goes up to about the same amount depending on what you're having customized and what features you need. Asana, as far as integration goes, integrates with many more platforms than Smartsheet does. Again, they have the open API. And any developer should be able to connect it with your system. We've researched connecting Asana with ours, and I believe the development hours involved were pretty extensive, but once you have that one-time fee covered, let's see here. They have a good reporting wizard, and then there's many templates to utilize as well. Asana, I can't remember the total number, but I was flipping through and it looked like dozens and dozens of different project types that you could, in theory, create. So at that, let me bring over Asana here. So again, I'm using kind of the free 30-day trial version. We don't really use Asana at GoodellNet too much. So I just created a small little project here that we can look at together. And you'll see a lot of the same views are similar to Smartsheet. This is that Kanban board or card view. So here I just have 3 sections instead of the 5 that I was talking about, but have requests in progress done. You can flip things around within here. You can assign those to people, set due dates, descriptions. I like Asana. It seems like it's a little bit more intuitive and a little bit less going on, so it's easier to visibly digest than Smartsheet. Again, they have a timeline view, their version of the Gantt. They have a calendar view as well, very similar. I like Asana from what I've seen so far is because they have kind of a little summary page that you can give status updates on the project. You can send that out to the stakeholders. You can have an overall view of kind of the incomplete task, complete task, and set that up by week, by month, or whatever it is. In forms, I don't have access to this, but you can create a lot of different forms and different reporting tools within Asana as well. They have a pretty strong reporting wizard. And aside from that, here's a couple other views of Asana, just different projects that in there. So lastly, the third tool I wanted to go through today is Microsoft Project. This is one that I think most people have heard of or used by now. It used to be, I feel like, a little bit more popular to use before all these web interfaces started coming out, but it's still around. It's still a pretty good tool. I think as far as being utilized in different industries involved, I think Microsoft Project probably allows you to edit with the most detail and create the most custom data that you want. So some of the benefits of it has a familiar Microsoft feel. So a lot of it, I'll show you here in a minute, feels like you're editing kind of Excel sheet. Again, if you're a Microsoft company, it integrates really, really easily with all the different Microsoft platforms. Unfortunately, it's not a base Office 365 product at this time. It's an add-on product. Price-wise, I think if you just license it as a one-off, you're looking at like over $1,000 for the price of it. I think they do have an option, kind of a monthly fee that's a little bit more expensive than the Asanas and the Smartsheets of the world. I'm not sure of the exact price. Again, this one, here, let me jump back. This one integrates with, like I said, all the different Microsoft products. And that includes Skype, and then the new one is Teams. That's what a lot of companies are switching to now. And again, as we'll show here in a minute, there are a couple different views. They're a little bit more convoluted, in my opinion, and hard to digest with the eye than Smartsheet or Asana would be. But again, your kind of the data you use is up to you. So the more data you want to use, the more you can view. Here's a couple different views of different charts from Asana. So over here on the left, just kind of tracking the different tasks. Up top is kind of a view of their Gantt chart, and down low is one of the reports you can export. Let me open up Microsoft project here. So you can see, starting a project, it's similar to Smartsheet, where over here on the left, you have your details for the different phases and tasks. You have the duration, start, end dates, and predecessors. Those are kind of the standard pieces. You can see over here on the left if it's assigned to a resource already. You can click that, do scheduling yourself. So assign resources, whoever that is. Over here on the right, that's kind of the Gantt view. That just shows when the project's starting, when it's finishing, and when each of the tasks within it are starting and finishing. And you can see here if there's little predecessors involved, the little arrow will show up. Find that in Smartsheet and Asana. So within Microsoft Project, you have a few different views, like I mentioned. Different network diagrams you can display and build. Calendar view as well. And the feature that I'm the biggest fan of is some of the different reporting tools that you have. Again, making these display the correct data and making them display exactly what you want to see is a different story. But as far as what you have the capability or what you have the ability to do, Microsoft Project pretty clean with that and exporting that. You can see here, it's a burn down chart. It's a few others. There's a cost overview. So these are really nice, clean, detailed reports. Upcoming tasks, if they were to be filled out. So aside from that, there are different things to consider when choosing the right product for your team. One of them is cost. Like I said, there's the first two you'll find are pretty standard across the board as far as project management tools are concerned. It looks to be somewhere in that $10 to $25 range per month per user. So if you only have one project manager, that's not too expensive. But if you want that project manager to be able to communicate updates and give access to your teams as well, that could get a little bit more costly. Or you could also go the licensing route where you're just buying Microsoft Project as a one-off that way. The features are definitely something to consider as well. Microsoft Project, it looks like the capabilities are definitely a little bit more extensive than like Smartsheet, Asana, and Maven Link, and some of these other ones on the market. But again, if intuitiveness is and kind of the ease of use is important to you, then some of these web-based ones are probably the way to go. Again, though, like Asana, for example, isn't great with budget management. That's not really a focus of theirs. It's more the task management. And so if that's huge for you, it's like, well, I need to be able to track budget on this project. Then maybe Smartsheet or another one out there, Maven Link, which is similar, is the route to follow. Again, integration capabilities. So if there are apps or applications at your firm that you're using, like ProLaw, or if you're, a legal firm, or there's different ones in every different industry. Like we have a client in the moving industry, they use Mover Suite, and I know that they use Smartsheet to integrate with that. So if that's important to you, being able to integrate those two and kind of push and pull data back and forth, then that's something that you'll definitely want the way as well. And then lastly, what works best for your industry or project. So for example, if you're running a huge construction project with hundreds and hundreds of people working on it, with many different moving parts, and something simple like Asana probably isn't going to capture all the detail that you want to review. So lastly, I appreciate your time today. I guess let me start. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Or if you'd be interested in kind of researching these more for your firm, I'd also want to offer to scheduling a separate call as well. So I'll go ahead and open it up to anyone that has any questions. All right, Carrie, any last words from you?
Yeah, so thank you very much, James. Appreciate that. A lot of helpful information there. And like James said, if I know that I've attended webinars before and I don't think of the questions until after the fact. So if you guys have questions whatsoever, you can contact James. His information is here, or you can also have that conversation with your AM if you do want to learn, additional information about the tools that he discussed as well. So otherwise, thank you so much for taking time out today and joining the webinar. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day.